We are on 90.77 for the west of Greater Buenos Aires, from the community radio station of the West, the radio station that opens its microphones to the neighborhoods, to the organizations, to the unions, to all those who want to express what is happening in our organizations, in our communities. And now we have José Luis Perea on the line. He is the delegate of INTA in Castelar. We have spoken with him on other occasions. The situation of INTA, despite the advances in the justice system and in Parliament, continues to be delicate because the austerity policies, Miley's chainsaw, continue to attack this organization. José Luis, good afternoon. Mauricio Israel and Leo Rodriguez here to greet you.
How are you? Thank you for taking the time to talk.
Well, how are you? I just apologized. The president of INTA was calling me about a situation with colleagues whose contracts have not been renewed, and a specific colleague whose name is Manuel. And so, we took a series of actions throughout the week, from Friday to today, understanding that there could be more colleagues whose contracts were expiring and, therefore, what we were saying was, well, if the contract could be renewed and then, based on a request from the director of the center here, the Institute of Biological Resources, directly, sorry, I'm shorting the phone a little bit. No, there's no problem. Settle down, José Luis.
But you have very clear information, so the request that Pablo Mercury made, the president of INTA answered it. We made it, it was requested on Friday, the president of INTA too. And we took a series of very important actions to protect the colleague and, in principle, there is a commitment. President Linta just told me to raise it to the council. And, the council, we want to explain, as President Linta just explained to me, that there was an important meeting of all the members of the elective council, the 10 parties, because we had to say there were 5. The liaison table was created, and then you have the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, the Faculty of Agronomy, which has representation, and then you have the Vice Presidency, and you also have the President and of course a member who was appointed a few days ago, whose last name is Muchester. Clearly, if you confirm to me that they discussed a number of issues in the Secretariat of Agriculture, they met on Tuesday, and well, specifically that meeting discussed an INTA issue, some things were discussed, let's say, already resolved. In May, he was just telling me, let's say, to somehow appoint a series of structures that had been approved by the previous board of directors, to give the names, and somehow there were commitments to resume. Of course, we have already presented an agenda from 8 Castelar, an agenda that is widely agreed upon by all workers nationwide, because we have consulted them, and that agenda, well, we also intend for the National Board of Directors of 8 to make that presentation. In fact, the branch where we are here in Castelar, which is the National Center for Agricultural Research, which is almost the place where the largest number of workers in the entire country are gathered, the 8 branch, has already made a special request, as well as the 8 branch of INTA to request a meeting, of course, with the entire board of directors, with the presidency, the national management, the vice presidency, all the members already appointed, but well, there is still no date. What he does say, Nicholas Bronzovic was just telling me, was that, let's say, there were indicators that, in the liaison committee, the entities would be willing to start in a period that, let's say, not too long. However, well, we believe that this delay in time harms us workers, and that's why we have presented our agenda where we say no layoffs. If there are contracts that have expired, they should be renewed. That's what we told the president of INTA, that they should be renewed based on creating a kind of competitive process that can be passed on to the plant. The renewal has to have those characteristics. They are all INTA workers. We did an important activity, let's say, here in Castellar to defend our colleagues, but especially for one of them named Manuel. Well, we are waiting because we believe that a new contract will be made for him.
There it goes.
So we still don't have the full list of colleagues who are in this situation. José Luis, we can say that INTA's operations are gradually returning to normal with what you're telling us at a national level, and at least the complaints that you've been telling us about during this year of contract cancellations, adjustments, and uncertainty are starting to be heard. The outlook is starting to change, based on what you're telling us, and well, this idea of opening competitions for specific scientific and professional careers so as to avoid these future risks. Of course, that's the idea. We even discussed, look, we were also taking a proposal to the national management, where we told the national management, because the national management is already in office and, clearly, if it doesn't have the board of directors, which is the engine, we would say that the national management is the main gear that moves the main engine. But, since the board of directors is not there, we told the national management that there are a number of tasks that the national management can carry out ex officio, a number of pending tasks that were left over from the time the functions of the national management were cut off and even before Decree 462, and the other decrees, and therefore, we proposed to the national management, whom we have known, Ariel Per, for a long time. We told them, well, there are many activities that can be started. We have to put CIMAT into operation, which is a body to, let's say, protect the safety and elect into workers, COPI, which is a very important body that is the one that carries out the understanding, the process of reading, the comprehension of the sectoral collective agreement, and takes on the workers' claims that are very much postponed. We made a proposal that is very novel because we understand that we already had to be in a performance evaluation period. That's what we were also telling the national management, which could do it ex officio, convene this great national evaluation that is being done for all INTA workers, since we are already in the period for the evaluation of the year 2024-2025. Well, and clearly we are, 2025. We are in the 2025 period of government, and we were telling the national authorities, in this case the national management, that we could, precisely take actions such as requesting that the Chamber of Deputies, this was already done by another national director, mobilize the resources of the National Agricultural Technological Fund to reactivate all internal circuits. And we believe that we can reactivate the project portfolio in this way, all the portfolios that somehow fit into the medium-term plans, within the strategic plans of INTA as well. This, and therefore our approach, is that INTA must continue in accordance with the format given to it by Law 21,680. And we tell the Board of Directors, if it is going to come, we have an agenda, we want to be part of, from the point of view of, let's say, observers within the Board of Directors. We want to have an oversight for the workers, a proposal that we have also taken to the President of INTA, the National Director, because, in fact, we are also observers. There are many activities of the National Board of Directors in which the unions participate as observers for program director competitions, for national programs, for national director competitions, for regional director competitions, and performance evaluations of all the senior staff of INTA. There is always a union-type dispute, and this time we are saying, well, but we want to have knowledge that extends much further, so that we can know what the agenda is, each of the points that are planned to be addressed. We want to know that those books that the Board of Directors has are somehow opened, what the claims are. Well, Bronze was just telling me here that the Board of Directors is thinking about organizing a voluntary retirement. The President just said that a few minutes ago, and so we reject voluntary retirements because we know that INTA has a staff of 6,000 workers. Imagine if 1,000 people were to take voluntary retirement, all the groups would be dismantled. So it is practically a process of dissolution in INTA. So, clearly we are telling society, we are telling the INTA Council, the President, the national leadership, even, let's say, all the authorities who have been agreeing with us, both in Parliament and in the courts, and we are going to have to start a plan of struggle to demand and enforce the definitive and absolute repeal of Decree 462. And so, for that we have to say that workers have to take on that agenda and, specifically, since the performance evaluation is not being carried out, it has not been carried out yet, they should carry it out. Since there is, let's say, public organizations have the possibility of taking courses, with training, and workers can move up one more salary level, one more category. We believe that INTA is in debt with two categories. We are asking that to begin, let's say, the cycle of the new National Board of Directors of INTAC, workers should, let's say, be recognized for what they owe us, at least as compensation for lost wages, at least two categories. And we believe that this is also a proposal that we have already developed, that we should discuss a salary guideline perhaps with a fixed sum at the beginning, and we consider that this salary sum has to be around 10%, let's say, of what the basket would be. Basic family support that a family needs today, which is 2 million pesos. Well, ultimately, we have many proposals to make and, we clearly believe that we should be heard, we should be understood, because somehow, with all the effort that has been made, all the workers, from the first to the last in the INT, we have managed to reconstitute this enormous entity that has a national representation like practically no other, that has 6,000 workers, and we are willing to get it up and running because there is a lot of work to do. We want to work, we want a salary increase. We want INTA to be reactivated, and that is why we are making the people we are introducing known.
Here's an overview. We are talking with José Luis Perea, a delegate at INTA Castelar. There you mentioned something, Jose, that this situation is due to that decree of the President of the nation who wanted to modify this structure that you mentioned, a collegiate structure that INTA has with all sectors of industry, production, science, which this decree erased with a stroke of the pen. And that, after the repeal of that decree, INTA, we can say, begins to take on a new form.
Look, it was actually going to take on a new form. We believe that it has a definitive form that was already given to it by the law creating INTA, but of course, there is a repeal of the decree and there are two more decrees, 571 and 585, which were also, let's say, inapplicable. And so we say here, there are actually resources. Yes, there are resources, there are almost 1 trillion pesos. In December, we are going to have practically 950,000 million pesos that will remain, let's say, as part of the surplus of the different forms of financing of INTA that are not used. And so we are saying that INTA is prepared to take a great leap, let's say, that it has to take all the historical aspects that it has had, that it has to maintain the historical disciplines, but that it must develop a course, let's say, in favor of the great national needs. I wanted to tell you that the board of directors was discussing one of the issues that took the longest to discuss, 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago with the secretariat. It is really the situation that has arisen since the government gave an advantage that the grain companies finally took advantage of. Let's say, there are 9 or 10 companies that have taken part in this issue. This issue was discussed in the INTA board. The INTA board of directors discussed this with the Secretariat of Agriculture because clearly, let's say, around 10,000 million pesos were wasted in the hands of the grain company, 10,000 to 12,000 more or less that amount. And clearly not only have they, let's say, defrauded the Argentine state in some way, but they have also taken the resources and operations of all the sectors that are agro-exporters, small and medium-sized, who have not received a peso and who have clearly paid the withholdings. That is a hot topic, a topic that is red hot. That is why it is also one of the issues that INTA will not restart. And then, clearly, we are seeing that the government has been heavily defeated at the polls, and it will surely be defeated again now in October. and the government has created an unnecessary crisis, to a certain point of view. We can say that there is a deficit, let's say, at the hands of the grain company and against the agricultural producers who are the ones who have the capacity to export. José Luis. You who have this relationship, right, with the producing sectors at INTA, do you perceive strong discomfort with the national government on this issue? No, the discomfort that is perceived, we perceive it, right? There are a series of relationships, of course, with the productive sectors. The discomfort comes, but the greatest discomfort that has taken hold of the public state comes through the networks, through the media. It is part of an economic scandal, national, that is not going to close easily. Wounded, this gap that was created with the issue of the countryside, because they were deceived, evidently. So, we tell the board of directors to start carrying out what it resolved before the government took office, which are the resolutions that it made and that it, somehow discussed at a national level in all INTA mechanisms, which is known as the institutional strategic plan, such as the medium-term plans, such as the design of the new project portfolios and all the mechanisms that INTA has to develop and put into operation, all the groups that are somehow operational within INTA and that have infinite supplies so that they can go out. We need INTA to be reactivated, right? We are not reciting voluntary retirements. Of course, voluntary retirement is good for colleagues who are about to retire. It can clearly be good for colleagues who are about to retire. It is a voluntary retirement that ultimately has, let's say, some connotations that we reject because of this characteristic that there is a situation of emptying. These are open layoffs. But beyond the fact that it may benefit a very small group of workers, it is disastrous. And so in some way they were already discussing this issue. And this has to be made very clear. The colleagues have to know that this was discussed. So we were saying, the board of directors is going to meet. Well, the board of directors as we know it, right? Because it has not yet appointed, let's say, the 5 members that ACRIA, the Agrarian Federation, CONINAGRO, Sociedad Rural and Confederaciones Rurales Argentina have. Those are the 5 members. But, the entities are present, that is, after the puppet they put with the name they put, let's say, is almost, let's say, a matter of secondary importance because they have already defined what they are going to do. We are telling them, don't go back with voluntary retirements, don't go back with downsizing, don't go back with land sales. Well, we presented it together with a series of ideas and proposals that I have just told you about, defined and outlined. Precisely so that all INTA workers and the rest of the citizens know that there is a way to make INTA more operational than ever, because look, the country is also completely paralyzed. Let's say, there are no economic activities. You know what could make INTA start functioning, start working, start calling, let's say, for example, all the people who generate the inputs, for example, who provide us with suppliers, who provide us with raw materials, who need works. INTA needs to be reactivated, let's say, in, let's say, very strategic places. It should be a direction for even regional economies. This thing about using the National Agricultural Technological Fund and yet the Council, the Board of Directors seems to be coming with the same recipe. So, well, clearly we have already started discussing this. We are going to discuss it in the Assembly and we are going to prepare to develop a plan of struggle. Because if this board of directors, let's say, comes with the same score, with the same script, we clearly believe that it has been rejected by society, by the productive sectors and also, by the workers of India. So, we believe that they no longer have room to return to these old formulas that are being overcome and that have clearly been politically defeated.
We are talking with José Luis Perea, delegate at INTA Castelar INAD. There he told us, right? This organization has a collegiate political leadership with the private, productive sectors, with, science and the voice of the workers. Today, Jose, he is telling us about the situation they are in. The last thing I ask you to do is to clarify the role of INTA in society, this autonomous body of the state. What role does it play, and where? Do we see INTA in our daily lives? because sometimes we lose sight of it.
Well, of course, people have to understand, for example, we say this all the time, that every product that we consume, right? That reaches our table, that we can also have in our fridge, that we find in the supermarket, every national product has an added value that was made at INTA. In other words, everything has happened over the years through improvements that INTA has made with added values, with all kinds of inputs, with technological advances of all kinds, of course. So, INTA is an improver of what we consume. Of course, the Argentine diet needs to be greatly improved. What is consumed here is not the best in the world, not in terms of cereals, grains, or even meats. All of that needs to be improved because ultimately we know that the best is exported and the worst is left for the domestic market. That is one role. That not only is it not up to INTA, but it is up to a government to develop policies that, in any case, hand in hand with the workers, with the unions, expressing it clearly, by exercising workers' control, because this commission that we want to set up in INTA to control the elective council a little, not to control it, let's say, in an arrogant way, but we do have to be informed of everything they do. And so INTA has these characteristics. It is an organization that has 6,000 workers, that has 400 units throughout the country, that let's say has a state characteristic, but its heads, its national board of directors and its regional boards of directors are private. Everything that INTA produces is to improve the private sector. Therefore, it can be said that for every dollar that is invested in INTA, there is, let's say, a kind of service that is provided to workers through these production methods that are improved by between 10 and 14, that is the calculation that is being made. Therefore, it greatly helps to develop regional economies. It greatly helps to create a kind of containment barrier, for example, against the advance of desertification, of discriminatory deforestation, of this misuse of water. In other words, INTA played a fundamental role, and we believe that with the resources that we save from the National Technological Fund for Agriculture, but based on another type of agenda, on the real needs of the Argentine population, fundamentally that are recognized as national needs, not the needs of the Cereala, not the needs of a group of crooks, let's say, who take the money and who empty and destroy the environment, exploit the workers. There, the colleagues from the oil companies were just denouncing how the fraud was carried out. The colleagues from the oil workers' union were denouncing how the fraud was carried out and how the Cerealinas have kept billions of pesos, dollars, in 48 hours. So, all this has that must be rediscussed. We are uniting to serve the great needs of the nation and to serve the needs of the people. And, of course, we want INTA workers and workers who work throughout the productive system to be key to giving a new role to this INTA that we believe must enter in 2026, let's say, with all the technological advances and with, let's say, the main flags of environmental protection, of, let's say, reducing environmental pollution, of reducing carbon footprints. It has important work. And we say that even the colleagues from AMBA, which was the experimental one that was closed, must be reactivated because clearly Decree 462 states that in some way we must go back with almost all the actions that were carried out. The same goes for all regional centers. We have regional centers, 19 centers and almost 24, depending on how we can count them. There are research centers, those must be maintained as they are. So, well, we also do all these ideas. And we raise them to the workers as part of this scheme, of this agenda that we have and that in some way we call the workers' agenda to reduce it, let's say, to simplify it, but it is quite interesting, quite important, and we are making it known at a general level and at a national level. That's what we are working on. One question I have, this fund that you mentioned several times for the promotion of agricultural technology. Yes, it is financed with what resources? Right? The fund is a surplus. There are 3 options here to finance INTA. The DIRCHI has 3 options. I'm not going to explain them, but it is also financed with resources, for example, from statistics, with different resources, let's say, from products, from imported articles from the sector, right? From everything that is also imported. And there are three options, but one of the main funds is these, and that generates a certain amount of income and entry. And of course that leads to spending a 10th part, and that is all that the surplus goes to a fund known as the National Agricultural Technological Fund from INTA. Because they are unspent resources, you understand? So that the board of directors, together with the national management, wants to use those resources, and INTA would become, let's say, take a very important technological leap. We could double the number of workers we have. That's why it's very important to explain that they have all those who are on the permanent staff, because INTA is ultimately its workers in permanent labor action every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. José Luis, one last short one. What's up with the Pro Huerta program that always had such an impact in our urban area that you can no longer see the bags of seeds for home gardens? What's up with that? Well, that was dissolved. That program, like Cambio Rural, is, part of our demands, and, in a way, what the program entailed was, through a series of extension methodologies, because now extension is also happening. They want to give it to these groups that are within INTA, which is the Acria group. They are the ones that promote or have developed privately. They are companies that generate a series of productive dynamics through which producers are incorporated through a fee that they pay and receive advice that, in some way, sets the course of what needs to be done in the Argentine Republic. In the case of INTA, the extension was in the hands of another type of criteria. Well, and then, clearly, these social programs are dissolved and a new wave of privatization is promoted within INTA through these groups that I am telling you about. So, it is no longer there.
A pity, because INTA seeds were activated in a very high percentage. Nothing to do with the little seed packets that we can buy in nurseries. They are already missed in the urban cone.
Yes, they are missed. Everyone asks for them. The truth is that it is one of the most visible faces of achievements, because despite the fact that it is a very small kit that will not modify, let's say, the needs of people, however, it has managed to develop as almost like a registered trademark of INTA in specifically the most needy places in the urban cone, where it even had many values. I tell you that it reached all kinds of places. It reached schools, universities, even prisons, hospitals, in all places, opening community doors, and well, that is part of a package that, well, was dissolved at the time by the Ministry of Social Development.
There it is, in complicity, of course, with the INTA board of directors that was in place at that time, and they agreed to eliminate it. There it goes. Thank you, José Luis, for this time. Well, thank you for calling us, and well, greetings to the entire audience. José Luis Perea, 8th delegate at INTA Castelar, reviewing the situation of INTA at a national level. This request from the workers to launch the new board of directors and the execution plans for the entire organization, and the concern, above all, for the situation of the workers. Yeah,